think we can foster more cultural experiences and exchanges between the people of Liberia and the United States?
Sure.
I have a few ideas, but I'm
Good. All right. Well, I want to hear them because I'm very open-minded about any of this stuff. Because again, I don't purport to be an expert on any of this stuff. It's so when I think about this, we already have a pretty robust exchange program. And just the other night, this was reinforced in my mind. I hosted a group of a pretty small group of former recipients of these grants we do, which can take all kinds of different forms, including studying there for a year or longer, or just going for a month-long program, or even doing virtual stuff. It runs the gamut. But all of these are kind of what we would call short to long-term investments in Liberia. And we do this around the world in different countries, but it's a way to expose them to, in a way that's kind of grassrootsy, but like it allows people to see what it's like, what America looks like, what Detroit looks like, what other cities look like, how we function, how we approach problems. It's more of a mutual exchange of ideas, and sometimes it can be just that, just a wonderful exchange of ideas. But it's exposing young Liberians, usually on the young side, to how we approach different, whatever those be, economic or political or what have you. What I want to see, though, is more Liberians coming back, but more Americans in general coming to Liberia. And that speaks to the tourism sector.
Exactly.
And, there's so much Liberia has to offer, really. I feel strongly about this. And it's, honestly, President Boakai, it's part of the arrest agenda.
Yes,
It's the T.
Yes,
It's the
one of
T.
one of the
It's
top
the T.
tiers.
I've had to memorize the arrest agenda, but it's the T and the tourism. And, we've been talking about this, and even before I came here, I was having discussions about this. And, you get here, and I pose it like this: how do you get, if you're a tourist off the plane, how do you get from Robertsfield to Robertsport,
Yes.
which has great beaches and a whole kind of surfer
One of my
culture?
favorite places.
I loved it too. Back in the day in Peace Corps, I used to go there often.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was
Lovely.
cool, but it was cool even then. It's got a great vibe, but you need an infrastructure. Again, you need a hospitality industry.
Yes.
And that, again, if you just think about it, there's so much potential there for the right investors, Liberian, foreign, but Liberian, I hope.
Yes.
But you can grow that industry so much. And then you can get into the history, you can build all that into, so that they learn about the rich history
Right.
that we have, which is so unique. There's no other African country that has that history with the United States.
So I'm
Yeah,
actually on the board for LINTA, which is the
Oh, yeah.
Liberia National Tourism
Absolutely.
Association. And I've been on the board since I arrived. And again, some of the challenges that we
Yeah.
face, we have people that want to visit, but just as you're saying, infrastructure, there's been talk about streamlining the visa process, which
Yes.
I think they're in the process.
They are working on that.
We're
They're
working on that, everyone.
Yeah, multiple entry visas.
Yes,
yeah.
multiple entries, so I think we're getting to that point.
Sorry, I'm misspeaking there. Not multiple entry, longer term visas. Sorry,
Yeah,
that
so they can
extended
stay for a
time.
longer
Forgive me,
time.
yeah. Don't want to get in trouble with the farm system.
But I think we're getting to a point now where I think there needs to be a succession, right? We have
Yeah.
to get the infrastructure together, because like you're saying,
Yeah.
right now we get, the airport road needs to be fixed in order to even get people
Yeah.
here. But there is so much opportunity
Yeah.
in Liberia when it comes to tourism, especially with a lot of our eco lodges.
Yeah. Which I want to visit, but yes, I agree with you.
The Gola Forest is something that's
Yes.
intact.
Yes.
Unlike our other neighbors, we've even seen over the years animals that had escaped
Yeah.
because of war coming
Yeah.
back in. There
Yeah,
was
yeah.
a video a couple years ago, 2 elephants had wandered back into Nimba. So these are all, I am a conservationist. I
Yeah.
work with a lot of different groups, the Liberian Chimp Rescue and Protection.
Oh, very cool.
I'm a chimp champion. I don't know if you've heard of these.
No, it's a new term to me, but yeah.
Yeah, so
and I do know what you're talking about. This is the island.
LCR, no,
Yeah,
this,
no,
LCR,
first, forgive me.
There's an island, right?
Okay, yeah.
And then those are the chimps that were tested on that
Right.
there.
But these are natural,
Yeah.
pre-existing, and okay.
Yes, and
This
then
is cool.
LCRP is
Yeah.
another organization that started, they came originally to work with those chimps, but then they started getting chimps from the trade.
Yeah.
So they have a facility of over 100 now, where they out in Charlesville. And I actually, after visiting the Labasa Wildlife Sanctuary, I did an episode there learning the new FDA rules, because we're trying to change the
Yeah.
culture.
Yes. Yes.
I got confronted right here in town in Sinclair with someone trying to sell a baby chimp.
Oh my gosh.
And when you get a chimp that small, that means they've killed the
Yeah,
mother.
yeah.
So I sprung into action. I called all the authorities. I ended up bonding with this chimp for about 7 hours because there were so many issues. Recently, I actually reunited with Tom. Tom is living his best life in Charlottesville with a bunch of his friends, and he actually
You rescued him.
Yeah, he remembered me. Jimmy and Jenny were shocked. He jumped, and he offered me a mango, and it was a really beautiful thing.
That's very cool.
There's so many opportunities in the tourism sector for us to do this, but like you said, we have to get there with tourism.
You do, and it's tourism. It's also, to your point, illegal trafficking and all that kind of stuff. It's, you've got to part of this public information campaigns, public education campaigns, and also having the enforcement mechanisms. And I know Liberia is working on that, and we're working through U.S. Agency for International Development with them on that. But it's such an untapped potential there. And I want to say, like, even back in the day, to give you an idea of how extensive Peace Corps was, we actually had a volunteer in Sapo National Park, and he was working, and that's if you could get people there more easily.
Yes, and you may not know this, there are now lodges in Sapo.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah,
I want to go there.
I want to too. I'm not that great with nature. I'm allergic to everything, but there were plans for me to go and kind of basically just make fun of me in the elements, but I still want to go. And it's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful place, and untapped, and not.
It's a resource. And honestly, one of my biggest fears beyond the humanitarian catastrophe of the Civil War was that those what we call primary or equatorial rainforests.
Yes.
Which, by the way, some of the last areas or swaths of rainforest run through Guinea and Liberia, and Cote d'Ivoire a little bit as well. But I was afraid that it was just going to get exploited and illegally logged.
Right. And luckily we didn't.
It didn't, and I'm shocked by how much remains.
And I think
that's it.
I think that's a good way too when we're talking about fostering relations with the United States and Liberia. And of course, it's very difficult to get people here. But this is what I'm trying to do with these videos and showing people.
Yes.
So maybe kind of picking up how we can show these wonderful things through video, and then maybe that'll entice people to come and visit.
Of course, of course. And then one last thing on this is, and again, as much as I can help do this through my role, but as an advocate, but you need, right now to get to Liberia, as you well know from America, it's not easy.
It's not easy.
You got to go through Brussels. You got to go through Accra. Back in that's a thing from you asked me what's different now. It was easier to get here in the 80s than it is now, and that's something that would just bring in so many more tourists or people just wanting to come back to Liberia if you could make that a more direct.
Hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you know this. I was appointed in 2022 as the ambassador of the Diaspora Affairs Unit. Most of my audience is in the diaspora. Makes sense.
Cool.
It came from the diaspora.
That's
spent
great. Okay.
26 years in the U.S. and decided to move back in 2017. So there's a lot of interest from the diaspora wanting to come back, start businesses, visit, and that's basically what my show has been about, kind of showing them what Liberia was. Because before this, there was not a lot of great imagery out there.
Yeah.
When you research Liberia, you get the Vice documentary about the war and then Ebola.
Yeah.
So
yes. No, you're right.
If I wasn't.
No, but you're right.
Yeah.
100% there is, and both of us from our experience in communications.
Yes.
You don't want those to be the first images.
Yeah. And luckily,
it'll change the narrative.
And luckily, my little channel has gotten some traction up there, so we have a lot of different things to show.
Don't undervalue your. No, seriously.
But what role do you think the Liberian diaspora can play in strengthening those relationships?
Sure. It's a great question, and one I've been thinking about a lot, even before I came over here. And was able to talk to some leading folks in the Liberian diaspora, including an old friend from my journalism days, and my sister was a journalist for the New York Times, and she works now for the New York Times. Helene Cooper, he was wonderful, and we talked before I came over here, so shout out to Helene. But the other thing that just jumped out at me the other day was something that the Speaker of the House said. I think it was a speech or an interview, but the number caught me, which is the number of remittances, the total remittances
Yes.
that come back here. He said, he quoted a figure, $800 million.
Yes.
That is significant. And it came up in this, again, we had a small reception for some of our program recipients and alumni, I guess is what I refer to them as. But we were talking about, it's an unseen economy here
Yes.
that really props up a lot of people. And it's a huge influx of just cash into the economy. So that's a huge help and a
Yes.
support. How do we mainstream that? How do we
Right,
get
and how do we
that?
get
Yeah.
that into
How do we
an actual
get-
program or
Exactly.
something?
How do we
Yes.
get that? How do we get those to become investments?
Exactly.
And you've got to create, and that's on the Liberian government and this administration, and I know they're already working on this.
Right.
But how do you create a business climate?
Right.
Where Liberian diaspora or even non-diaspora want to come here and invest?
Are there any initiatives or agreements already in the works to enhance bilateral relations?
Sure. It's something we're always looking at. I don't have any huge announcements to make today, but our goals largely, our priorities largely match up. Fortunately, with the arrest agenda of the Boakai administration, infrastructure, education, sanitation, tourism, agriculture. We're working in all of those sectors. Did I say education? Because if I didn't, that's important as
Yes.
well. But but we're always also looking at how we realign and how we reallocate, and that's something we're always doing, and where our money is best spent and applied, and where it can best meet the most urgent needs.
Exactly.
So nothing, I can't, like I said, no big revelations there, but just to say that we're always looking and that cooperation continues. Again, it goes back to, the other thing is I want to see Peace Corps expand. They're having a hard time globally building back from COVID because they literally drew down globally Peace Corps after COVID.
Yes.
And to your point that a lot of your audience is diaspora. Diaspora can serve in the Peace Corps in Liberia or elsewhere, but this is a cool opportunity to reconnect with this country.
Yeah. If you're looking for a way to get
if you are.
to break back in,
I would
here
urge you
go.
to look at the Peace Corps website, find out what the application process is. I know they're coming up on one of the thing and one of the cycles, but think about it. It's a way not only to serve your country, which is the United States, but also to give back to the global community, or in this case, Liberia. I can't overstate it enough. I don't know. I can't think of a more worthwhile way to spend a couple of years. So that's something I also want to see grow back to where it was back in the 80s. And right now it's about 26 or 27 volunteers. Back in the day it was 150 or more, and they were all throughout Liberia and doing lots of different things. And here, more education, some a little bit of health, but anyway, we want to expand that.
Yes.
And then, the other thing is just, I want to see more private sector involvement, and I
Yes.
take that seriously. As we've discussed it multiple times before and during this interview, that's the future here.
Yeah, and even being in this office today, Edens 360, which is a fintech company
Yeah.
that supports small businesses with loans and financing, these are the types of things that we need to see, because
Yep.
what we often do in Liberia is heavily rely on government, and we've said this so many times that the private sector is what really will help boost the economy.
Yep.
So enabling people, to be able to take control of their
Yep.
businesses and do what they need to do, I think would be great.
And a quick anecdote, if I may, I'll try to keep this quick, is a couple weeks ago I went to Mount Coffee hydroelectric plant, or hydroelectric.
Very cool place,
facility.
by the way.
It is a very cool place. When you see, and they'll show you a film showing how completely devastated it was after the war,
Yes.
and how it's been rebuilt. And again, it's a perfect vignette of how international donors came in the aftermath of the war and helped rebuild this key infrastructure. But what Mount Coffee has done since then, it's now Liberian run, Liberian manned, or the staffed, and Liberian owned. And it's got a vision for the future, and it's moving into solar. It's moving into expanding its reach, all in a way to become energy independent or make Liberia energy independent. And you look at that, and you're like, that is the vision, the model of the future. That and it was wonderful. We did a little bit of press afterwards, and I got asked the question, "What is the U.S. government? What's the next big investment for the U.S. government in LEC?" And the CEO, Captain,
Captain, yes.
yeah, it was great. he leaned in wonderfully. He said, look, we're at a stage now where, we're grateful for that assistance that the U.S. and others have given us, but we're at a point now where international businesses are looking in and saying, or banks or whatever, saying, we want to invest in this.
Great.
This looks good. And that's where you want to be.
And
That's the
that's what we're
future.
saying,
Yeah.
moving away from this.
That's exactly,
This relationship of assistance to.
so you're seeing
Yes.
that. There are stories here. And that's another thing I want to really highlight in this or in other instances or opportunities I have as ambassador is you can criticize all day long. You got to shine a light on where there's cases of good governance, good business, entrepreneurship, innovation, because there are those instances, there are those examples here.
Things are happening.
Yeah, things are happening.
Great,
Yeah, exactly.
great. So, bringing it all back to you.
It's all
What
about
are
me.
your, yes, all about you today. It's and lovely conversation.
Thanks.
What are your hopes and aspirations personally for you as the ambassador during your time here?
Sure. We've already talked about it.
Yes.
It is, it is to see this country, which has already come a long way, take the next big step in its evolution, which is to become. It's already politically stable.
Yes.
But we need to see it become develop economically, become prosperous, and become an island of stability in this region of Africa. And I think as you see that develop, it then will take on a larger role in the region. And I said, I've had really good conversations with the foreign minister, who is terrific, about ways for Liberia to play at the next level. Its military is already doing peacekeeping operations in Mali and elsewhere. And these are signs of a country that's growing beyond its borders.
Right.
It's already, as you all probably know, it's seeking a UN seat.
Yes.
And those conversations continue. And these are all signs of Liberia gaining its, we call it its sea legs.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's starting to, develop and say, okay, we're a stable democracy. But the next step is economically. It's got to develop economically, entrepreneurship, investment. And then, again, I want to see this become this being the U.S.-Liberia relationship becoming one of dependency to one of shared strategic partnership. That is in.
I love that.
That is in
Partnership.
America's national interest, but it's also in my personal.
Yeah,
that's
and
what I
Liberia's,
wanna see. And
Liberia's
Liberia's
personal,
interest, obviously, yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Well, this has been great.
It's
I'm
really good
so
fun.
happy that this has been such an easy, great conversation with you. But before we go,
Okay.
I would be remiss.
Okay.
As a Liberian, you're an honorary Liberian at this point. I mean, you've been here, you come back. This is like the best story ever. I love it. Now, every Liberian, you know how we hold our food dear to our heart.
Yeah.
So everybody, I'm sure, wants to know, what's your favorite or favorites
Yeah.
Liberian dishes? Now, I'm gonna just preface it and say, I hope it's something from Grand Bassa.
Yeah, well,
At least one of them.
I've eaten my share of fufu.
Yeah.
Which is good.
And Dumbora, of course.
And Dumbora, yeah, absolutely. I love. I've got a preference for cassava leaf.
Oh, high five.
Yeah, I mean, it's good, and this is so. Sorry, I hate to go back to like policy, but back in the day, we ate a lot more. We ate a lot more locally grown rice, and
Yes.
I don't want to get there back, but like we used to call country rice, but
Yes.
but it was delicious, and but yeah, there's nothing better than like the other thing I will say is I'm really partial for the fried plantain with pepper.
Ooh, this
It's-
is a real
it's
Liberian.
really
right
great.
here.
Yeah, I can overdo the pepper, but it's all good. I love it all.
And as this, hopefully our friendship grows, I'll be able to show you some of these things. A great point you just brought up, the red rice, country rice that you
Yeah.
all used to eat. Some people are starting to bring it back. In fact, a young man from Philadelphia, a friend of mine,
Oh, wow,
his name is George.
that's
he
great.
now produces his own rice and sells it on the market.
Oh, wow,
Yeah,
that's so
so
cool.
I'll have to get you
Yeah,
a
I
bag and
definitely
try
want
it
to meet him.
out.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I'd love to meet him.
Yes.
No, and I had a long talk with the Minister of Agriculture, who's
Yes.
got a real vision too for flipping I think it's 30 local, 70 imported, and he wants to try to flip that. It's
Yes.
going to take some doing, but that's the vision.
It'll take
That's the
time.
vision.
It'll take time, but we thank you so much for sitting
Of
down
course.
with us.
We can
here
do this
today.
again.
I would love to. I would love to keep this thing going. As
It's a
you
great
get
conversation. I
great
really appreciate it.
conversation, and looks like we have a lot in common. I want to thank you so much again, and again thank the U.S. Embassy Monrovia for continuing to keep this series going with me. I think this is going to be one of my most popular ones, so I have a feeling.
Wow.
But thank you, Ambassador, so much for coming in. I
Of course,
appreciate it.
of course. Thank you so much, Philomena. It's
you.
wonderful. Thank you. Thanks.